Welcome to the first video on the Home of Comics YouTube channel. I'm Brayden, I'm going to be one of your co-hosts on the main podcast, but today I have a very special first video for y'all. We're going to be breaking down the DCU slate based on what we've known from the past, the present, and the future of the DCU. And as well as that, I'm just really excited to be making the first video for the Home of Comics YouTube channel. Now, we have a very small connection with the broader Home of DCU media landscape. Cole will be another main podcast host, and of course, that Twitter is sort of how you guys will be able to keep track of all the DCU news. But I do want to mention that we'll be talking about other comic book entities as well. We're going to be talking about Marvel and DC on this channel, as well as other geek culture things, very broad on purpose there. We're going to be breaking down our favorite film franchises, TV shows, regular movies that aren't necessarily part of a franchise, things like that. You're also going to have a lot of comic videos. We're going to be breaking down both DC and Marvel comics. Gaming videos, we're probably gonna be playing a lot of, Marvel's Wolverine when that comes out, any new Arkham games that come out, DCU canon games that come out. Those are sort of things that we're gonna want to do walkthroughs for, let's plays for, stuff like that, as well as, maybe some Marvel Rivals content or something like that. In addition, I also want to, maybe play a few Star Wars games when those come out. That's sort of that geek culture thing that we're talking about there. We're also going to have reactions and reviews of certain projects, both from DC and Marvel, as well as, again, other film and television entities. I'm also, really excited to see what our audience thinks of different videos. If you guys have recommendations for us in the comments of things you want to see, make sure to comment down below. We're also going to be having, again, the main podcast for news. That's going to be DC news, Marvel news, anything else that's really newsworthy in the cycle. We're also going to have an extra series on this channel, which is really exciting. It's definitely a little bit of a creative writing exercise, and I'm really excited to see how our other team members sort of handle that. And once again, this is a team of comic book fans, regardless of how we feel about certain projects. We are all fans at the end of the day. We're definitely going to voice our criticisms as well as our praises for each project that comes out, but we are going to be very honest about what we genuinely think about certain things, and I certainly don't want to sugarcoat anything. So you're going to see that also throughout this review of the DCU slate. I'll be briefly bringing my own ideas and my own criticisms of certain projects, and that is again 100% my beliefs and not necessarily reflecting everyone on the channel. So we're going to start off with three projects that are sort of loose canon for the DCU. I do think that most of this is mostly canon. But the first one we're going to be talking about is the Suicide Squad. This one's directed by James Gunn.
I don't like to kill people, but if I pretend they're my mom, it's easy.
TMI, mate.
It is part of the DCEU. However, it also carries over a lot of content into the DCU, and I do think that it's an interesting starting vessel for the DCU just because it's not necessarily very important within the grand scheme of things in the prior cinematic universe. It now being a collective building block for the DCU was a very interesting idea from James Gunn. It was definitely a very awesome movie, and I had a lot of fun with it. It's one of my favorite DC films, probably my favorite DC film ever. So I'm personally completely fine with it being the first technical entry of the DCU. And all we really know is that it takes place about 2 to 3 years before the events of Superman. Um, Probably somewhere around the 2022 timeframe, if we're giving it an exact year. We also have Peacemaker Season 1. Now, I believe this project is about 6 months prior to Superman. It might be a little bit more than that. It's definitely before Superman. It's a direct sequel to the Suicide Squad, and it follows again Peacemaker. It's also an adult show, so again, starting off with two rated R projects is sometimes very interesting for a cinematic universe to do. When we compare it with Marvel, they didn't do a rated R project until Echo, and that same year they had Deadpool and Wolverine, which was their first R movie. They really try to keep it kid friendly for a lot of that. DC sort of not shying away from the R rating has certainly helped them in terms of creative expression, but I also think that sometimes you get projects like, I don't know, like Clayface, like we'll discuss later, where it's rated R and it also doesn't really matter that much, so it's like unfortunately very skippable for the remainder of your of someone's like watch watch through of the DCU, and so projects like that may eventually get brushed under the wayside, and we'll get to that when we get to that. Peacemaker was very good. I had a lot of fun watching season one. Again, part of the DCEU, as is the next project, which is Blue Beetle, directed by Angel Manuel Soto.
Let's party.
Nice choice.
I had a lot of fun with Blue Beetle as well. It's PG-13. It is definitely kid friendly. It's also one of the last projects of the DCEU, and also doesn't really have much to do with anything else in the DCEU. We don't know when this takes place. It could still be about 2023, which is basically its time frame within the DCEU. It could also be further in the future, more in the past. We don't know because James Gunn simply just doesn't have that information probably on hand. He would probably have said something if he did. Creature Commando Season 1 is the first project of DCU's Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters.
There, give me that. There you go. Now everyone's happy, right? Except for you, because you no longer have food. And you're ugly.
It came out late 2024. It's also probably taking place around 2023 or 2024, like probably about a year prior to when it actually released in the DCU. Um, we know that it has to take place a little bit after, but a little bit before Superman, simply because of things that happened to Rick Flag Sr. However, it can't have been too far in the past, just simply because the storyline needed to pick up at some point, and we know when Superman takes place. I loved Creature Commando season one. I didn't think it was perfect. It's very short, and that's also another problem I think that we just kind of have with shows in general nowadays, is that they're just very short. This one in particular does feel like it kind of could have just been an animated movie, but they didn't make it one, and that's just something that happened. There's not much I can say about that otherwise. We have Superman, the tentpole film of the DCU so far. Definitely my favorite DCU film, unless we count again the Suicide Squad. I had a lot of fun with Superman. I thought it was everything it needed to be. I'm not very critical on it, and that's sort of just my, rose-tinted glasses of it all. It's also the most important DCU project we're going to be covering probably until Man of Tomorrow, further on in the slate. So Superman absolutely matters a lot. It's not something you can really skip. It's not something you should even consider skipping. It's also probably the best Superman movie ever put to live action, maybe with the exception of Superman 1978. But those two movies are neck and neck for me. Like, they're both really perfect encapsulations of what Superman is as a character. That's just my thoughts. Moving on, and again, that was directed by James Gunn. Creature Commandos was directed by Dean Lorey. I'm going to try to keep that consistent throughout. Peacemaker Season 2 was also directed by James Gunn. And you kind of get a lot of Gunn's craft through the first few projects of the DCU, and that's by design, but also it's going to be very interesting this year seeing three products that are not made by James Gunn. Peacemaker Season 2 sort of tackles the multiverse of the DCU in a way that's very different from Marvel's tactics. And I actually really like what Marvel's done with their multiverse. Maybe that's a hot take, maybe it's not. But I do enjoy seeing previous characters sort of come into the fold. DC doesn't really have that plethora of legacy characters, at least not ones that you can very easily put into a multiverse. We tried to see that with the Flash, and it really didn't work. Michael Keaton was not that compelling. When we get something like No Way Home, there's a lot more hype and enthusiasm behind Andrew Garfield coming back and Tobey Maguire coming back. But it just matters more for Marvel, I think. And DC sort of using their multiverse to tell the future of their story rather than the past, I think is a better strategy for DC. We've seen it work with Peacemaker Season 2. We also see the beginnings of Salvation, which I think will be a main storyline in the DCU, at least up to the end of Chapter 1. And we're going to see potentially Salvation come back in a few more projects, and I'm going to be discussing those soon. We have this year's projects. We've got Supergirl, June 26th. That's only in a few weeks, and we will be breaking that down on the channel, absolutely. This one's directed by Craig Giuseppe. It's the first project that maybe doesn't have Gunn's touch, although looking at trailers and looking at everything we've kind of known about the movie, I do think it's going to be very much like a James Gunn movie. It does sort of give up Guardians vibes without it really being a Guardians movie and really even being based on a team. It is also adapted directly off of Supergirl Women of Tomorrow, which was written by Tom King. He's one of the lead writers of the DCU. I have a lot of excitement for Supergirl. I think it was my most anticipated project going into the year from both Marvel and DC. At this point, it's very possible Doomsday has sort of eclipsed that, but even then, Supergirl is something I'm very, very excited for, and I cannot wait to see it in theaters in just a few short weeks. It's going to be a great time. Moving forward, we probably have the most important project on the list. Lanterns here. It's probably the most important project of 2026, I should say. It's coming out August 16th. It's directed by Chris Mundy. He's done Ozark and a few other series, maybe Lost. I think that might have been Chris Mundy. Either way, I haven't really tapped into any of his work, so I personally don't know how good he is at running a show. He's got a lot of great accolades to his name. That's always a good sign. Lanterns is also designed as a multi-season story, and I do think that we will get multiple seasons of Lanterns. Season 2 is already being written right now. I simply haven't put it on the slate because we just don't have enough information to really pin down a time frame or pin down anything in regards to a Lantern season 2. It is also going to bring back Guy Gardner, who we've seen in every single project or every single year of the DCU thus far, which I think is also really, really interesting because he will be coming back in Man of Tomorrow in 2027. Moving forward with the last project of 2026, it's probably my least anticipated of the projects of 2026. Maybe it's better. Maybe I anticipated a little bit more than Lanterns. We've got Clayface, directed by James Watkins. It's coming out October 23rd. I'm a big fan of body horror movies. I loved The Substance in 2024. It was my pick to win Best Picture. It did not. Not fully shocked about that, but I loved The Substance. And, I don't think this movie will be anything like The Substance. They're two different body horror movies. I do think it'll be a lot like The Fly, which is directed by David Cronenberg. Familiar with Cronenberg's work. I've liked a few of his movies. I've loved a few of his movies. I definitely have a love-hate relationship with Cronenberg as a director simply because of what he does to his audiences when he's making his movies. I don't think James Watkins is going to have that same style, that same flair that Cronenberg had. However, Clayface is also an interesting project in general because it's very much standalone in its nature. It's also going to be the first project chronologically in the timeline, probably even before the Suicide Squad. Um, it is a direct connection to Creature Commando season 1, but at the same time, I'm not fully sold on Clayface really needing a movie, and I don't think the movie is really going to justify it. I think it's just going to be a good movie, and that's gonna kind of be it. It does lead me to wonder if we're gonna get more projects in the DCU that simply are just good scripts, not necessarily important to the overarching universe. Something like that could actually be really interesting to watch as a viewer because you're basically just going to get good movies or good shows, not necessarily connected to the main plot. It might tire out audiences. It also might really reinvigorate audiences. We'll have to wait and see, and we'll have to wait and see on October 23rd. Moving forward, we do have Man of Tomorrow, directed by James Gunn once again, July 9th, 2027. I do expect it to be the first project of 2027, despite it coming in 7 months into the year. Man of Tomorrow is probably the most important project on this list. It's the sequel to Superman. You need to do a lot of heavy lifting here. It's bringing back the Justice Gang, which is, Metamorpho, Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner, and Hawkgirl. We're going to be bringing in Jon Stewart into the fold, which of course Lanterns follows Jon Stewart and Hal Jordan, although I sort of am under the impression that Hal Jordan may not survive the end of that season, just based on what we've known about both Lanterns and Man of Tomorrow. With Hal Jordan not being cast in Man of Tomorrow, it definitely leads me to believe that he's not surviving Lanterns. He also might return in Lantern Season 2, so really, who knows there. I also know this will be covering Salvation. Peacemaker might be in it. We know Supergirl and Lobo will probably be in it. I know Supergirl is in it. Lobo, genuinely, who knows. Also, all of the Daily Planet cast will be coming back, which is really important because we're going to be having a project later on in the slate that is going to specifically touch on the Daily Planet and what they've been up to during the events of both Man of Tomorrow and probably also Superman. We got Creature Commando season 2, directed by Dean Lorey once again, probably going to be hitting HBO Max in 2027. I do think it's going to tap into the Salvation storyline. We're going to be seeing the new team that was created in season 1. There's not a lot of interesting characters there, to be honest. King Shark is a character I really, really like. He was in the Suicide Squad. He's a personal favorite of mine. He's not going to be voiced by Sylvester Stallone anymore, which is both a good and bad thing because I don't really like Sylvester Stallone that much anyway. But he is a good voice actor. Like, he does have a very specific voice and a very specific cadence. And so whoever is doing King Shark is basically going to have to just replicate his voice rather than make it their own, which is unfortunate, but also sort of just the way it has to be. Sylvester Stallone is also probably busy with other projects. He is a busy guy, and that happens as well. Mr. Miracle is probably also coming out in 2027. This one is showran by Tom King, who did write the comic, which makes me think, oh, okay, this is good synergy from the comics to the screen. However, I will say with regards to Tom King, he's never showran a show before. I'm not really sure he's up to the task. Mr. Miracle is sort of going to be a mini series in the DCU. I do not think it's going to be a very important series, other than the fact it will be introducing us to the new gods and Darkseid could be a main villain of the DCU. It's really hard to tell. I do think it'll be hitting HBO Max in 2027, just after Creature Commandos, maybe even at the same time. It also, I expect it will be, a one day drop, so you're going to get all the episodes in a row. I think they're going to do that just to have time to also premiere another show, which is going to be the Jimmy Olsen / American Villain show, which I do expect to be coming out in 2027. It's going to be show ran by Tony Yacenda and Dan Peralt. I hope I pronounced those names correctly. I know that they're comedy guys. I have not really tapped into their work. I do think that the Jimmy Olsen show is going to work best as a comedy. It's also a docu-series set in the DCU. It's going to be covering Gorilla Grodd most specifically. I think it could be our first look at the Flash in the DCU. If anything, it might just be a blur, which could mean a lot. Like maybe the Flash shows up in another project down the road. But what I do know is that this show is probably designed to have multiple seasons. I'm very excited to see what that means for Jimmy Olsen as a character. Is he going to be around in a Superman 3? Provided that happens, is he going to take more of a center stage in some of these projects if he becomes a fan favorite? I just don't know. I'm very excited for this show. I think it's an interesting concept at the very least. And yeah, that's all I have to say about the Jimmy Olsen show. Moving forward, we have what I expect the 2028 slate will look like in its entirety. We got Paradise Lost coming out at the beginning of the year. We recently got news that there may be showrunners working on it. Personally, I don't fully buy into that rumor. Maybe other people on the team do. I just don't really expect Paradise Lost is that far along. If it is, I do expect it to be the first project of 2028. Otherwise, I'd probably shift it with Wonder Woman, which is the second project here. But we're going to talk about both of these together because Wonder Woman has a writer, Anna Noguera. She did write Supergirl. I do expect a Wonder Woman greenlight to happen in the next few weeks, honestly, because I do think that off the success of Supergirl, provided it is a successful movie, it's a very good chance for James Gunn to sort of be like, hey, by the way, the writer of this project is writing a Wonder Woman movie, and this is when it comes out. You could announce a director alongside, Wonder Woman being greenlit, and we could be well on our way to production. Which is important too if it's going to come out in 2028. You kind of need to be doing that right now. Paradise Lost, of course, I do think that you'll have some character crossover with Wonder Woman simply because it's a prequel to Wonder Woman. While it is set thousands of years before, it is a political drama set on the island of Themyscira. I do expect some of the characters to cross over just because these characters are really, really freaking old. Thousands of years is nothing to a Themysciran, so I do expect it possible that some of them will carry over into Wonder Woman. That being said, Wonder Woman is not in Paradise Lost, at least as of the first season. No matter how either of those projects goes, I really just hope that James Gunn does not abandon his female characters. It's something that I don't think he will do. However, if Wonder Woman underperforms based on the success or the not success of the DCEU Wonder Woman films, I am a little scared that Wonder Woman will kind of just be sidelined, and I do not want that to happen. The other projects in 2028 also may have a brief connection in that I think they might both feature Batman, but we have The Brave and the Bold coming out in 2028, directed by Andy Muschietti. I do think that this movie has been plagued with a lot of controversy because Muschietti's directing it. Of course, he directed The Flash. However, Muschietti also directed It Chapter 1, It Chapter 2, and It Welcome to Derry, and all three of those are really good. I know that's maybe a hot take. It Chapter 2 happens to be one of my favorite movies. There's a lot wrong with it, I'm sure. It's, again, rose-tinted glasses for damn sure. However, I do think that both of those movies are really good. And that being said, I can't really sit here and say Andy Muschietti's not a good director. I do think he has less flair than Matt Reeves does. He's going to be directing Batman Part 2 in 2027, which is not a DCU film. I do think that The Brave and the Bold, unfortunately, being written also by Christina Hodson, who did write The Flash, makes me a little bit more concerned that it'll be more like The Flash than It. Also, Fantastical Batman would perhaps not be Andy Muschietti's strong suit. Maybe he would actually do better with a dark, grounded Batman, just based on his work with It. What I'll give in regards to It is that it is very campy as a horror project, and maybe that can carry over into the Batman Brave and the Bold, especially if we're going to have Joker as a villain. Joker and Pennywise are somewhat similar, at least in how you would probably portray them. That being said, I don't really know if that's why Andy Muschietti was called up for this movie. I think James Gunn just really likes them. It's hard to say. I also think Batman could be involved in the Waller show, which I think has been renamed to Checkmate. It'll be coming out in 2028. Right now, it's being showrun by Crystal Henry and Jeremy Carver. I do think that will change. I don't think this is the same show they signed up for. Maybe one of them stays, maybe both of them stays, but I think they'll probably both be swapped out. The only reason why I think that Batman might be a part of this is simply because I think it'll be interacting with the government and the way that superheroes sort of react to the government. It'll take place after Creature Commandos season 2, I would believe almost certainly. So depending on what happens in Creature Commandos might determine what happens in Waller, or Checkmate. I also just think Batman or Bruce Wayne might just be in it because he's a rich guy, and I feel like he would have stake in what's going on with the government and the superheroes that are involved in the grand scheme of things. Uh, that being said, I just don't know fully what Checkmate would even be about, so it's hard to speculate outside of that. I do think that we have maybe two 2029 projects already announced. I think Blue Beetle, the animated show, is going to be one of them, directed by Michael Puga or Puga. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. But Miguel Puga also, I know that he's worked in animation before. I also know that Blue Beetle, if I'm being completely honest with you, probably deserves to be in animation a lot more than live action. I don't think that the movie was bad. The movie, however, was the least grossing DCEU film of all time. And despite it obviously being a bad year for the DCEU, I don't think that that reads very well for Blue Beetle as a character. I do think if you want to have films with Blue Beetle in them or as the lead character, you're going to have to build him up some way. And I think animation might be the best way of doing it. In this case, of course, James Gunn may have made a really great decision here. I also don't know if it's a direct sequel to the movie, which also may determine Blue Beetle's real canon status in the DCU, but I do think that it matters somewhat just because they've sort of described it as a retelling of some events of the movie, also sort of a sequel to the movie, and also sort of telling its own story, which is so broad that I don't think we can really gain anything from that other than just to take it at face value and move on. Moving on, we actually have a show that got a pilot order. I just don't expect it to be that far in the slate currently, and it is Booster Gold, which I do expect to be coming out in 2029, and it is going to be showrun by David Jenkins, who is again very comedic in what he's chosen to work on thus far. Booster Gold has to be an outright comedy, and James Gunn has described it as such. Booster Gold's also a time traveler, which is going to, I think, flow, sorry, with a lot of what Peacemaker has been doing so far, potentially what Blue Beetle will be doing. I think he could go back in time to try to get Ted Kord or something. That could be a plot line there. Booster Gold might be in the Blue Beetle show. They could both be in each other's shows. I really don't know. There was the rumor that Kumail Nanjiani is playing Booster Gold. I don't think that that's really the case anymore, just because this will then be 3 years in the future. Why would you have cast him this far out? But who knows? I certainly don't know. We don't know a lot about Booster Gold other than what I've just described, except also that, of course, it's gotten a pilot order. I just don't know if that's really a thing that's happening, or that it'll really even be greenlit past that anyway. Moving on, I do have a project that I do think will hit theaters in 2030. It could also hit theaters in 2029 since we don't have any movies for that. And that would be the Teen Titans movie. It is also being written by Anna Noguera, which makes you think, okay, maybe it's 2029 or 2028. But we also don't have a lot of room for a lot of projects. And so for me, that also gets me kind of concerned that Teen Titans is maybe pushed back a while. We also don't know what the team looks like. We don't really know anything else about this movie. It will make probably close to $1 billion. I think the Teen Titans have that sort of name recognition that general audiences can sort of latch onto. I think it's an easy PG-13 movie. I also think that you'll have Robin in it, you'll have Nightwing in it potentially. You'll have Starfire, Cyborg, Beast Boy. You'll have all those characters that people know and love from the Teen Titans show or Teen Titans Go. Of course, I honestly am more familiar with Teen Titans Go. It came out when I was a kid. I was actually not alive for the airing of Teen Titans for the most part, which I think is really interesting because I am, 21. So I also just think that by 2030, you will have sort of lost your Teen Titans audience, at least in terms of the 2003 show. So maybe you switch it up a little bit. Maybe you add new characters in or something. Or maybe you nostalgia bait a bunch of millennials. Who knows? That being said, I do expect it to drop in 2030. Moving forward, the Untitled Bane and Deathstroke movie is one that has really piqued my interest. Not as in I'm excited for it, but as in I don't know why the hell it's happening. I put it down as 2032, but to be honest, it could come out as soon as like 2028 if they really wanted to, because it has gotten motion. There has been a director potentially named Greg Mottola. Now, Greg Mottola did direct Superbad, but that doesn't really translate to a Bane and Deathstroke movie, so again, I don't really know why he'd do it. He also did direct episodes of Peacemaker. Maybe it'll feel like a Peacemaker movie. Maybe Peacemaker's in it. But I don't really think he has much crossover with Bane or Deathstroke. Also, doing Bane and Deathstroke before having Batman in the universe seems like a stupid misstep. That being said, Bane and Deathstroke could also introduce Batman, and that would be exciting as well. Clayface could also introduce Batman, which would also be exciting as well. So I just don't know. 2032 is the date that I had, but honestly, again, it could literally be any time between 2028 and 2032. I think past that, there would be no point in making the project. That's just my personal thoughts. We have three products here that I put down as who the F knows? Because who the F knows? The first one is Swamp Thing. This one is being written and directed by James Mangold. I don't think it's happening personally. James Mangold also was going to write and direct, or direct, sorry, I don't think he was writing it, Dawn of the Jedi for Star Wars, and I do think they're going to make a movie like that. I just don't think it's going to be James Mangold's version. I don't really know what's going on with Star Wars' future as a whole, but I do know that Dawn of the Jedi is probably not a part of it. That would free him up for Swamp Thing. I just don't think he's doing it. That's just my personal opinion. Also, with Clayface coming out, it's like, why the hell do we need Swamp Thing right now? But also with horror making a huge comeback at the box office with Obsession and Backrooms and movies like that, it does sort of lead to Swamp Thing maybe wanting to be made. At the same time, the Swamp Thing movies have not always been great, and who's to say this one would be any better? I think James Mangold has had plenty of misses in his career as well. I don't think he's perfect. For all those reasons and more, I don't think Swamp Thing's really happening. However, if it was to happen, it would probably be even later than 2032 or 2030. One of those dates, maybe it would be a 2031 movie. I really don't know. The Authority, I don't think The Authority's happening. I think James Gunn has been kind of candid about this and just been like, yeah, it's not happening. If it was to happen, I do think it would be an animated movie on HBO Max. We don't have a writer or director for this. We know it has been paused in development. That and Sergeant Rock, which is the last project we're going to be covering, have both been paused in development. Now, Sergeant Rock got a little bit more motion. I think it was going to come out this year, but the script wasn't really where it needed to be, which was interesting because there was a report saying it was where it needed to be and it was really good. And then James Gunn kind of said, no, it wasn't. And while I'm going to take Gunn's word there, I do think it's kind of interesting that there was conflicting reports. This was going to be directed by Luca Guadagnino, who, of course, is a very good director. He directed Challengers, which I really, really, really enjoyed. Um, However, I do think that like Sergeant Rock as a whole doesn't really need to happen. It would have probably taken place in 1940s, and it would have been probably with GI Robot at the helm as well. That would have made me a little bit more excited because I really did like GI Robot from Creature Commandos. I think I'll love him even more in season 2. But again, putting GI Robot in a World War II movie, it makes it a little bit more campy than it needs to be. They kind of have conflicting tones there. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe James Gunn was like, this feels like a camp movie, but also it's World War II. It needs to be serious. We don't have a good tone for this movie. I'm not going to greenlight this until I'm sure we got it where it needs to be. And then they were like, wait a freaking minute, Sergeant Rock, who the hell cares anyway? And so, of course, they just sort of stopped production on it altogether. I don't really know. What I do know is that the Authority will never happen, and that's pretty much the end of the day for the DCU slates, past, present, and future. I do think there's plenty of projects that we don't currently know about. I think there's a Superman 3 on development. I think there's probably already a Batman trilogy planned out. I just don't think we have the news for that yet. There's probably plenty of season 2s of projects like Paradise Lost might be a season 2 project. We already know Lanterns is getting greenlit for a season 2 most likely. I think some of those animated shows minus Mr. Miracle would probably have season 2s attached to it as well. I also think that we could have like a Lobo project in development potentially depending on how good Supergirl does. The timeline so far that we know of, if we pretend that the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker season 1 kind of don't count because we just don't really, it doesn't really matter when they take place. All we know is that they're before Superman. We have Clayface, Creature Commando season 1, Superman, Peacemaker season 2, Supergirl, and Man of Tomorrow. With the thought that Lanterns is probably after Supergirl and also before because it has sections that take place in 2016. And also the thoughts that probably everything else I've just mentioned will probably be after Man of Tomorrow. With that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment down below any suggestions you might have. I'm obviously very excited to see what our audience recommends for videos. It could be about Marvel, DC, or anything really. I'll certainly be sure to take a look at all of it. The main podcast will probably be coming out later this week. We'll also probably have comic reviews and also an intro video to get you guys acquainted with the rest of the team here at Home of Comics. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a pleasant day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.